Hi, everyone. On behalf of TTF, welcome. We're really happy to be sharing this space with you today. My name is Julia. I'm communication coordinator for the Tacoma Tree Foundation. A big thank you to Manny Sondaval, our TPL partners, for hosting and collaborating with us on this and many of our presentations. The Tacoma Tree Foundation is a local nonprofit focused on reducing barriers to trees and green spaces in Tacoma and the Puget Sound region. Tacoma is the city with the lowest tree canopy in Western Washington at 21%. And for comparison, the ideal is about 30% tree canopy coverage. So we're 9% below that. And we would need to successfully plant and care for approximately 200,000 trees to reach this canopy goal. Most of our trees are concentrated in neighborhoods with the highest socioeconomic opportunities. So our energies as an organization are focused on reducing barriers to trees and green spaces in the neighborhoods with the lowest tree canopy. We're here today because we believe that planting without education is not likely to succeed. Our educational program offers free opportunities to learn about a spectrum of ways we can engage and care for trees. We offer tree pruning and tree stewards workshops. We invite experts to teach us about the science of trees, local artists to help us connect to trees throughout their cultural and personal experiences, and we offer at least 16 different tree walks throughout the year, including neighborhood and mindfulness walks. A huge part of this is possible thanks to Tacoma Creates. Tacoma Creates is the reason why so many arts, culture, and science events are able to take place in our city. And 0.1% of your sales tax goes to make Tacoma Creates possible. So now to introduce Sarah. Sarah founded TTF in 2018 and Strategic Nature in 2021. She's the reason why our work begins with community. We plant trees to grow community. Sarah holds degrees in fish and wildlife conservation, watershed management. She is a certified arborist and an expert in urban forestry, community forestry, and health and wellness. Her work combines a love of trees and nature with her professional background in urban and community forestry. Her curiosity for trees and nature led her to pursue a career focused on urban ecosystems, health, and sustainability. In addition to leading educational talks, mindfulness walks, and helping to connect people to nature and each other, Sarah's currently assistant professor of practice in urban forestry at Oregon State University College of Forestry. So just some technical things.
I might have to use.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. You can add your questions to the Q&A section. Like Sarah said, she'll be periodically checking that. The chat is closed to participants, and trees are beautiful, but humans are flawed, so bear with us with any technical difficulties. One last plug, you can find this recording later and a lot of our past webinars and presentations on our YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about trees and tree care, you can definitely go there and continue your learning about trees. So thank you so much for being here. We're excited, and I will hand it over to Sarah.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We are going to talk about spring and spring awakenings and how that what that's like for trees and for the different organisms that depend on trees along the way. Before we get started, before we go too deep into that, we always like to do a land acknowledgement. I use the one that is provided by the Puyallup tribe of Indians on their land acknowledgement page. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe. The Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since time immemorial, and they continue to do so today. We recognize that the land we are standing on was stolen from the Puyallup people, and we acknowledge their stewardship, their forced removal, and their continued fight to live on their ancestral lands. That said, we're not intending to speak for anyone, but to respectfully take a step towards supportive allyship and to take responsibility for our own parts in caring for our land, the waters, the plants, and the animals. I feel like it makes sense for us to start with this land acknowledgement every time we talk about trees, every time we plant trees, because a really big part of that planting the trees is to be taking in like an act of stewardship towards the land that we reside on, and for some folks have resided on for thousands of years, which is pretty amazing. Something to value and appreciate and protect. Okay, so now we will move into how trees respond to spring. So just want to get started with seasonal transitions that, you probably already know, you're aware that it gets colder in the winter, and then at some point it starts to get warm enough or the days get long enough that we can start seeing some changes happening to the plants around us. And it's kind of a neat thing, really. Trees go dormant in the summer, in the winter, actually sometimes in the summer too, but they go dormant, and that's called endodormancy. And at this point, growth is inhibited. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but that's actually an active thing. There is something happening in trees when they're dormant to make sure that they stay dormant. And you can imagine that it's kind of like, I sort of imagine it like a teacher in a classroom when the classroom has a guest speaker, and the teacher is kind of like shh every time a student starts to talk or kind of interrupt or anything. It's like shh, shh. And the plant is kind of doing that too. They've got this system in place that's kind of shh, shh, any indication of growth, so that the plant will just hang tight and wait for the right moment. And then at some point that right moment starts happening, and at that point it's actually a transition stage. It's not like all of a sudden the trees start growing, all of a sudden things happen. It's that there's this transition period called eco-dormancy, in which some of these growth inhibiting factors kind of tone down, and growth could happen at any moment. It's not actively happening, it's kind of getting ready, like it's turning on its senses and saying, is today the day? Is tomorrow the day? It's coming up. But then at some point, magic starts happening, or as I like to think of it, biology starts happening. Okay, great. And buds start to break. So at the very tip of all these branches, there's this little bud, and in that bud, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it bursts open. And at that point, growth has been stimulated, and there's this real active thing happening within the tree. We'll keep talking about that as we move forward. But meanwhile, the ground is also getting warmer. And as the ground gets warmer, all that life inside the soil, all that microbial activity starts to kind of activate. It's also being stimulated, which can mean good things for trees. And then there's also this, like as all that stuff happens, as that warming's happening, there's also insects coming out, right? And as those insects come out, as those new bits of vegetation come out, wildlife start to think, oh yeah, it's time to get moving. It's time to like get more food, get going with all sorts of various activities like reproduction and that sort of thing. And then lucky us, we get to be these observers in our environment to look for these seasonal markers, to kind of take the time to notice when the buds break, to notice when you might actually be able to watch trees as they go from this eco-dormancy point to the point where they're actually breaking buds. So if you find a tree near you, you could maybe look to see if its buds have broken yet, and check on it every day and see if you start seeing this swelling happening, and then one day the leaves start to emerge. So just to take a step back a little bit, when trees are in a dormant stage, they are hardly growing. And it's in our case, some of our trees might actually be growing a little bit, particularly our conifer trees might be growing a little bit even in the coldest of winter. Well, not the coldest, but since we're just not having the coldest of times right now, we might still have enough growth happening to count for growth during the winter, if that makes sense. I'm not sure it does. But some growth might be happening. But for the most part, particularly our deciduous trees, the ones that are losing their leaves, they are coming to an almost a standstill. And as they do that, they're conserving energy, they're conserving water, and they're also not producing a lot of hormones or anything, but they're producing one, which we'll talk about in a second. And these dormancy strategies, they kind of help the tree survive. And there are things happening, inside. I'll show you a picture in a minute of these cells that kind of close up. And when they close up, they kind of help the tree hold on to whatever moisture they have and kind of shrink their cells a little bit so that they can protect themselves from changing temperatures, outdoor temperatures. But at this time, they also have these changing hormones. Um, and that is kind of interesting. We're going to keep going into that a little bit more. They're also losing their leaves, in the fall. Obviously, they're losing their leaves. And as they do that, that's also helping to protect the tree from any water loss or frost damage or structural harm. And you may have seen actually, I was leading a walk recently, and I talked about how if trees don't respond to the cold weather and kind of do this shrinking action that they do in the winter, they can, sometimes we call it explode. And they're usually not like actually exploding, but they can crack. And shortly after, and I don't know if it was my phone listening to me or something, but shortly after that, I realized there was a whole thing on, I don't know if it was Instagram or something showing all these trees that had cracked. And then that's what was happening, that the trees hadn't responded properly to the cold temperatures. And so, or maybe the changing temperatures had caused them to sort of lose their endodormancy, that really protective stage. Okay, so now we're moving into actual spring. Temperatures are getting warmer. We are starting to see these buds are opening. And I thought it'd be cool to show you these plasmodesmata. So even at the like cellular level, there's major changes happening. During the winter, these, you can imagine these, if you can see my cursor, well, or just follow the arrow here, it's pointing to one of these plasmodesmatas. And that is closed during that channel is closed during the winter. But as it gets warmer, it opens up and it allows all this movement of water and moisture and hormones. And they go up to the tip. So they kind of stimulate that bud burst. And what's really happening is, or one of the things that's happening is that this hormone, this abscisic, as a tongue twister, abscisic acid, ABA, which is a growth inhibitor that is used by the tree all winter long to keep it from actively trying to put out leaves, and which would mean losing all these resources in the cold weather. That acid, that ABA, stops being produced, and it gets lower and lower and lower in terms of the amount that's in the tree, which makes it possible for these growth promoting hormones to pop up. And they, in various ways, stimulate the tree to produce leaves, buds, open up buds, to create xylem and phloem cells so they can expand, which I think I'll talk about next. So these new leaves are emerging lighter and softer and able to photosynthesize. So we have that one kind of growth that's happening, this potential for photosynthesis, which is, a huge part, obviously, of what trees are doing to maintain their own life, but also support ours. And then they're also taking all this starch in the buds and in the branches and turning it into sugars like glucose, fructose, sucrose, and that is fueling cell division or growth. And then the xylem and phloem cells are being produced to make the cambium thicker. And so I should have put an image of this too, but just to remind everybody that the xylem and phloem are the series of cells that go up and down the tree, moving water up and nutrient sugars and things down. And that's where you see those tree rings are a line of phloem and xylem cells. And each year they produce new xylem and phloem cells. So in the spring, you can kind of see that the ring starts in the spring with this growth of new xylem and phloem cells. So as all these buds are breaking, it is sending also messages out to the rest of the world to pay attention, right? And so bees and all sorts of insects start to notice this and come to those flowers. Remember that lots of trees have flowers, so they are either being wind or insect pollinated. But the ones that are insect pollinated are kind of, inviting all this are attracting all these insects to come to them. And it is an interesting thing too, because what we do see is that, or what some of the questions out there are whether or not insects can catch up to changes in bud break. So if a flower is coming out earlier in the year, can the insects catch up and like hatch earlier or emerge earlier so that they can pollinate those flowers? And then so on, can the birds that migrate and depend on those insects, can they kind of move up fast enough to get access to those insects and the very important protein that helps drive their reproduction? So all of this is kind of synchronized, right? It has been all these plants and animals and insects, they have all evolved together, and so their timing has also evolved together, which makes it for very interesting kind of interconnections happening, and also a certain amount of, I guess you could think, of vulnerability. But I also thought it would be cool for you to think about like how you can pay attention to what's happening too. And so I thought I'd point you to a couple of tools which you might already be aware of because they're very popular and for good reason. One is iNaturalist, which you can, this is Tacoma, as part of Tacoma. You can see a few different things. Well, actually, you can see that there are many points which represent all of these different community members putting in different kinds of points representing different organisms, plants, animals, and otherwise. And you can participate too. So as you notice things come up, you can put things in there. And there's actually, I forgot to put it in here, but there's another one called, I think it's called Bud Break. And in that you can log when you see plants break bud, which is good from, changing temperature perspective. And also it's just fun to watch buds break. And right now, the magnolia buds are kind of starting to get bigger. I noticed that, and you keep your eyes open for red maples. They're probably coming up soon too. And meanwhile, I mentioned that migratory birds are, our birds are moving, especially migratory birds, so that they can come back and do their nesting activities. Some of them aren't stopping here; they'll just keep going. But you can kind of keep an eye for that too. I thought you might be interested if you're not familiar with Birdcast. It's a really cool. I thought I'd try to do like the interactive version, but last time it didn't kind of work that well. So I thought I'd just show you a picture of it and invite you to go look for it yourself. It's called Birdcast, and if we were able to hit play right here, you would be able to see this purple color changing across the country. And that represents bird activity, bird migration. You can look at it every day at any time of day. And so you can kind of watch as bird migration changes, especially cool to do it now because it's just getting started, right? And so if you start looking now and then you look maybe, every few days or once a week or something, you might start noticing like, oh, migrations are coming here. They're starting to see them come into the Pacific Northwest, and you can go outside and start looking for all those birds migrating through our communities. And I kind of covered this already, but caterpillars are some of those things that are walking around, emerging right now, well, not right now, but as spring comes. And those caterpillars are especially important for birds as they provide a ton of protein and I suspect calcium too. Most insects contain calcium, which is a critical part of a bird's nesting behavior, shell production, and that sort of thing. Another one that you can follow, and again, you might already be familiar with this, but it's a really fun one, especially in the spring, is to use Merlin, which has, it's an app, and you can take it outside and hit the record sound button, and it will help you identify all the birds that are making sounds around you. And I think, you know, so many people, myself included, use cell phones a lot and maybe too much. And so I generally try to encourage people to just go outside and not focus on the phone too much. However, I have found that this particular app actually helps me, and I've tried this with other people too, helps people connect with the outdoors in a different way. And turn on the Merlin app for, say, I kind of like thinking of it as almost a prescription. Turn on for 2 minutes and then try to listen, see how many birds you can hear, and maybe if you can hear different kinds of sounds, and then maybe even thinking about like how far away are the sounds compared to where you are. And then sort of look down, stop the timer and see, um, it's kind of a little challenge. See if you are correct, if you were able to come up with the same number of birds as Merlin. Maybe you even hear more. It doesn't catch everything. Um, and then you can also use it to help improve your own bird ID. So you can listen to the song, kind of maybe again like a quiz, hear the song, and it's like, oh, that's a nuthatch. And then look down and wait for it to highlight it and see like, oh yeah, Merlin thinks it's a nuthatch too. And then we can also observe signs of spring. Um, Nature journaling is one way we can do that. And if you've gone on some of my walks, there are lots of ways that we can engage with the outdoors with mindfulness. Like we said, there's cameras. So many of us carrying cell phones around. You can use that camera to kind of zoom in on something. It's not like if you do it with intention, it's not like a quick snap. It's kind of a looking, take a picture, look closer, maybe zoom in more, and really tune into whatever it is you're looking at. Okay, there we go. So one of the things we can do is practice directing our attention. And this is like one of the mindfulness things that I do with people when we go on walks is to practice this art of noticing what we're paying attention to and then using some discernment to decide what we want to pay attention to and making some sort of choices in our mind. And so let's say, for instance, um, you know, you have a hard day or something and you're thinking about it in your head, thinking about what happened during the day, maybe getting a little frustrated, revisiting the conversation or whatever it might have been. So that's your attention, paying attention to something that happened in the past. And we can use that skill of attention to then go, oh, wait, where am I? Oh, I'm outside. Oh, look, there's a red maple. Oh, wow, look at that. It's turning, the buds are turning red. Oh, look at that. That's about to flower. And then before you know it, here you are in the present moment, thanks to nature. And so we can use our skills of our senses, our various senses that are available to us at any time. Sight is a very handy one. It's kind of our go-to anyway. I think right now you can pay attention specifically to Perodia. Actually, Perodia just bloomed, so it's almost past its time as far as the flower goes. But that's okay because then come the leaves, so you can watch something else. And then, like I said, red maple should be coming up soon, as well as Oregon grape. Start seeing that, but you might actually kind of get ahead of myself here, but you might notice the smell of the Oregon grapes before you actually see them. They have a very strong and lovely smell. Likewise, the magnolias, you might notice right now some fuzzy buds, big fuzzy buds on a lot of different kinds of magnolias. So it's also a nice touch and feel kind of experience. And then Japanese cherry trees will start blooming soon. And you're probably already familiar that they are showstoppers. Those are the ones that turn, generally speaking, light pink. And then as the wind blows, as they finish their blossoms, it just scatters looking like snow on the ground. Very pretty. So we can keep practicing these skills of tuning in to whatever's happening, paying attention to your how it feels in your body and in your skin to notice the world around us. And we can also use these skills of hearing, auditory, by noticing maybe the sounds of birds. I'm going to try something here and see if it will work. I'm going to play something. I'm not entirely sure you're going to hear it. So if you don't hear it, maybe just use your imagination and think of some bird song. Just kind of let it come. And if you don't know any, there's always, if you ever see like a truck commercial driving through the forest, almost always there will be, oh shoot, I just forgot. It's almost always the same bird. It's related to a robin, but it's not a robin. It'll come to me. But it's the same bird, like a little kind of a trilling sound. All right. All right. I hope you can hear this online. You have to wait a second. Okay, I hope you heard something. There were a few different birds in there. There's a woodpecker, robin, I think some other things in there, maybe a sparrow. Um, but as you listen to these birds and these changing birds throughout the year, throughout the season, maybe even just noticing, like taking a breath or noticing your feet on the ground. And it's almost a way of like kind of going back to that land acknowledgement. It's a way of kind of paying a respect almost. I think of it that way a little bit, that like taking the time to notice these changes that are happening in the season is a chance to kind of show appreciation or gratitude, to not take it for granted. And then here's another one. We'll see if I can do this again. So we don't always have birds around, but once those leaves get started, you can start noticing the sound of the leaves moving, and you might not be able to hear this on this one. But just imagine these sounds of the leaves moving in the wind. And if you're like, I can't remember what that sounds like, then it's time to go back outside and check it out. We can also use our senses to notice seasonal changes around using smell and touch. Kind of mentioned touch with the magnolias. So as you notice the magnolias changing, you can feel that fuzzy bud. And really, there's this experience that we have of interacting with the plants around us. But then it's also just a good way to get to know plants. This act of actually touching plants helps us connect, helps us actually learn about them. So when we like feel that fuzziness of the magnolia bud, we kind of, it helps us get it in our brains like, oh, this is a magnolia. And the next time you see a fuzzy bud, you're like, that might be a magnolia. Likewise, we can kind of, right now is a great time to allow our nose to come into play a little bit too, and see if we can notice things like the Oregon grape blooming or the smell of the soil as it warms. And we can imagine that smell of soil as it warms is kind of an indication of all the life that's in that soil. And so just, in case that wasn't enough, getting dirty, exposing ourselves to the bacterium, Mycobacterium vaccae, stimulates serotonin. That's our, one of those happy hormones that we have. And so if we inhale it or come into contact with it in our skin, we have that happy boost of serotonin, reducing stress, improving learning. So between those things, maybe we should go outside and get in contact with the ground and the earth. And also, in case you need more evidence sort of to do that, the act of planting is more soothing than computer work, which I think is funny because it's sort of like, yeah, of course it is. But it does reduce our heart rate, and that's a good thing too. So getting out there and gardening is a way to connect. You don't necessarily have to go to like Yosemite or something. And speaking as that too, is that you don't even necessarily have to go outside to watch these changes, seasonal changes, and connect with nature. You can bring this nature into your home in the form of plants. This is a particularly lovely, I actually think it looks like a painting, but it's a friend of mine's. Yeah, isn't it beautiful? A friend of mine took this photograph during the pandemic, and those flowers and plants kind of helped her experience, her apartment in a more relaxed way. So with that, invite questions. I'm going to look to see if there's anything in the chat. Oh, okay. Just there's a quick question about breaking buds. Oh yeah. So I thank you for asking about that. So at the, as leaves emerge, like at the tip of every branch, or there's the leaves are kind of growing inside a bud. You can almost think about it like a seed, the way you have a seed and the seed kind of cracks open and out comes the rest of the plant. But in this case, it's kind of like a hard shell around the leaves, or the very beginning of the leaves, or where the leaves will come out from, protecting that tip of the branch. And as the spring comes, those leaves start to open, to basically push the envelope open, this envelope that is the bud, and it will kind of open up. And that moment when it's kind of going from swelling to breaking is, bud break is that refers to that moment when the leaves start to come out of that bud, and it's no longer kind of holding in the little bit of the place where the new growth will come from. Hope that is clear. So bud break just means, yeah, kind of the leaves are bursting and all those good, happy growth hormones are activated.
Is it as quick as one day it's closed and the next is open?
It depends on the weather. So, and I suspect the plant too. Like you can, but it does kind of happen fast usually. Like I showed that slide with the endo dormancy and eco dormancy. At that point where it's like eco dormancy and it's kind of like it could be, you start seeing some swelling. So we'll talk about bud swelling. But that moment where it goes from bud swelling to breaking open, that usually happens pretty fast. Can be overnight kind of thing, or usually middle of the day kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Some things that we can.
Are there things we can anticipate given warming temperatures, particularly if we're doing pruning or gardening, that kind of thing? Great questions. One, it is especially given pruning, it's great to pay attention to what's actually happening to the plant, as we would like to avoid pruning when that bud breaking is happening. Like we really want to do the pruning before that point, when the plant is still in that dormancy stage. Once it starts moving into bud breaking, we kind of like hands off for a while until it's moved past that phase, because it's a very energy intensive phase. So that's one thing. That's not so much a climate change thing, except for the fact that we do seem to be seeing bud breaking earlier, and which like closes our window of that winter pruning that we would like to be doing, when for most trees it's the least impactful. Okay, so that's one part of the question. It's the other thing, I kind of hinted at one point earlier on that when those flowers come out, when the leaves come out and flowers come out, all these organisms are associated with that, right? They are sort of dependent on the flowers coming out so they can get the pollen or whatever it is they're after. Maybe it's actually, maybe like a beetle is actually eating part of the flower. And when that timing is off, then it might not correspond to when the insects are actually emerging. And so by the time the insects emerge, it might be that those flowers have already finished. So the insects have fewer opportunities which is a conflict is a problem for them, and then also for all the organisms that are dependent on those insects. So imagine like we have so many migratory birds that come from like South America. They're flying. I like if we were outside, it'd be like they're flying so hard all the way up to here, and then they get here where they're thinking about nesting, thinking about creating, making eggs, uh, and they're not able to get enough of the protein. They need to recover, so they use those insects to recover from that flight. And not all of them are coming from South America, but let's just imagine there are some that are going really far distances. Some are maybe just coming from California, whatever it is, but they've gone a long distance and they need to power up. And then they also need to increase their calcium load so they can produce young, so their young can have calcium for bones, especially for birds, important, and also for those hard shells. When they can't get enough calcium, the shells get soft and then they don't make it to maturity. And that's we start seeing population declines in birds. Yeah, so that's the sort of the cascading effects of that change in bud break. I'll mention it too, that there's actually like a citizen science project around bud break, which is really cool because you can actually look for buds breaking and then put in when it's happening, like for that one particular plant and that one particular day. And then it's part of this big database. And so they can look at it as a whole, what plants are actually changing or how are plants actually changing and responding to temperature across space and time.
Yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about how also like nature is in harmony in such a way where it can often adapt, to some degree. And what are things that we can do to assist, kind of mitigate some of the man-made harms,
Yeah.
without interfering in that natural process. So if the birds are migrating and they're needing more protein and things like that,
Yeah.
should we be setting up more food feeders?
Oh yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think you probably could use bird feeders for that. I haven't actually like read anything about sort of the benefits of bird feeders for supporting birds in that way. I I mean, I do think planting more native plants is helpful for that particular purpose. And as somebody who talks about the urban forest landscape and like all the different trees, I do think we have to keep our like suite of plants open to a very wide variety of plants. But having at least some space for native plants it really does make a difference. Because I think I was going to put it in here, but I didn't put it in here that this little video I have of I think it's a Pacific viburnum, and it's just a cute little shrub, pink flowers, very cute, very like landscape friendly. But the photograph is just the video is maybe 30 seconds. There are like 4 or 5 different kinds of bees flying all over and like and flies, but not flies like, most of us have this negative association, but there's so many great flies pollinating are beneficial flies. Um, that yeah, like even one plant can bring a lot of beneficial insects that these birds will like love. Yeah. So yeah. Great. Well, it's so nice to see everybody in person. And for those of you online, thank you so much for tuning in. All right. Well, thank you so much.